morning and a really warm welcome to our webinar this morning, Veganuary 2022, how to make this Veganuary a lasting opportunity. This session today is brought to you by Breaks, Veganuary, Unilever Foodservice, VERJ Digital Insights and Winchester University. Without further ado, in a few moments I'll introduce our speakers and start the session. Today we'll be covering some top tips on how to prepare for this Veganuary, how to use it as a springboard really to create a fantastic vegan plant-based offering. The rise of vegan and plant-based has been absolutely unstoppable, and what we found is 82% of those that took part in Veganuary 2021 continued to eat 50% less meat 6 months on and made this a lasting change to their eating habits. With climate change, well-being and animal welfare very much top of mind, it's a trend that's absolutely set to continue. Diners are now expecting to see compelling plant-based and vegan menu options when they're dining out, and it can be a real deciding factor on where to eat for a whole group of people. So today's session will hopefully set you up really well for a great Veganuary 2022 and beyond. If you've got any questions during the session, you can submit them at any time. All of our fantastic speakers will be on at the end to help answer them. Just use the function in your Zoom bar to ask them, and we'll look at them as we go. We hope you really enjoy today's session and get lots out of it, and there'll be some fantastic resources to share at the end, so do stay on for those. Without further ado, I will start the video. It was a pre-recorded session just to make you aware. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our fantastic speakers today, starting with Max Wiggins, Insight and Innovation Lead at VERJ Digital Insights from the Lab Group, Zoe West, Senior Corporate Engagement Specialist at Veganuary, Tony Vanelli, International Head of Communications and Marketing at Veganuary, Kathy Amos, Head of Customer Marketing, Care Homes and Health at Breaks, James Birch, Business Development Chef at Unilever Food Solutions, and David Morton, Head of Catering at Winchester University. And now if I can hand over to Kathy and David.
Morning, Dave. Lovely to see you.
Morning, Kathy.
Worked at the university for quite some time and known Dave a long time, and certainly seen and heard a lot about your journey at the University of Winchester. So could you just sort of give us a little bit of background to the university and the journey you've been on, in particular in relationship to the plant-based Veganuary journey?
Yeah, certainly can. So we're a small university, 8,000 students, about 800 staff. And we have a small conference hospitality business. We also supply food to a local school and an old folks retirement club as well. So just small numbers. I've been at university 23 years, and you can appreciate a lot has changed in that period of time. 2007 is when we launched our first coffee bar, and that was a small part of our business. Now coffee and fast food, our grab and go sort of underpin what we do the majority of the time. And our conference business probably accounts for about 25% of all of our income. Similar setup to Toby. We've got various different events, things going on campus. We've got pizzas, we've got coffee, we've got burgers, but still a pretty big business. Stir fries are very popular. Our Taste of the World is a very big area, and it's also something we can incorporate both vegetarian and vegan diets into. It's really important. It's really part of what we do. We don't just specialize in one space that does plant-based food or even vegetarian food. We mix it right across the outlet. So if you go to get a pizza, you go to get a burger, you go to get a stir fry, a sandwich, etc., that's all made on campus, you should be able to expect to get not only a gluten and allergen-free roll or dish, but also a plant-based or vegan option.
So I was going to say, how do you sort of go about? I mean, I know that your journey's changed. How have you sort of shaped your menu for the students and colleagues as the times progress, particularly in this sort of a way of eating, really?
Well, I suppose a carrot and a stick, really. So our previous VC left on the 1st of April, and she was a vegan. Started as a vegetarian, became a vegan. And our deputy vice chancellor also a vegan. So the push from above was very strong, as you can appreciate. But also, we are unusual from the split of the sector that we are 65% girls to 35% boys. So great if you're a lad on campus, but it means that when we're doing healthy and plant-based and vegetarian and things like that, there seems to be an open door. A lot of the students that are coming straight from school know about sustainability and climate change and animal welfare are sort of really up there. And I think that when you're talking about girls to boys, that really provides us an open door. They're very positive and can be very vocal about their feedback. but listening to them is really key. So we deal with focus groups. We have focus groups with our catered students in catered halls. We run questionnaires. We've got an online survey feedback form. We do like a drop card that, when a bit like the Lady Love milk tray, that when we deliver hospitality, it's got a little card with a QR code, and they can give us positive and negative feedback sometimes. And we then take all that information and use it to sort of shape what we're doing. Taking the guys out. So quite often try and get up to London to Borough Market. We haven't been for a while because of COVID. But yeah, we get the guys out and seeing what's coming through there, and speak to you guys as well, see what's coming through the marketplace and Tuco Innovations. Really good places to learn and see what's going on.
Yeah, and certainly I think our journeys that have developed with you really go back a few years. You know, it was a lot harder to find anything that was suitable, particularly for vegans. Whereas actually, when you look on our website now, you can even tap in vegan, it will come up. We didn't have that a few years ago. It's all a sign of how the markets are moving and the expectation out there, without doubt.
Most definitely. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned about the cafes. You know, plant-based milk is everywhere now. Is that right?
Mm. Yeah, so back in 2007, I think we probably had a token bottle of soy on the side just for the odd people that used to come in. We've now got coconut, soy and oat milk. And they'll probably count for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, 3% or 4% of our overall sales. It's now 20% plus. So it's a big increase in plant-based. And we've recently just taken we used to charge an extra 30p, which is not uncommon in the marketplace. Pressure from students, we don't want to pay the extra 30p, so we've now taken that away. So, and we will see a bigger increase in those percentages going forward as well.
And sort of going forward, and I'm thinking about, you know, people are going to look at reducing plastics and everything else as a result of sort of COP26. Are there any sort of other areas that you think that sort of suppliers, or particularly like us, can sort of support and help more in this sort of area? Because it's going to grow.
Yeah, I mean, single-use plastic is a big price of university. We made a commitment now that we will remove all unnecessary single-use plastics by the end of December this year. So that was put back a year, but it's a big push for us. So we've moved from the PLA line cups. We've gone to compostable in the minority. We've got our own Gumtech cups, which are made of bubble gum, collected on campus. Sounds revolting, but actually really, really cool. Students love them. And we've got a deposit scheme cup. So the future is bright. It's really important that we get on board with suppliers who can supply innovative products. Clearly, we want people to use China. We want people to use knives and forks and stuff like that. But when there's a need for takeaways, then it's trying to use something that's sensible. So yeah, breaks.
Right, the right products in the right containers.
And they're at the right time in the right place and the right price, which obviously is a big issue for everybody at the moment.
Definitely. Thanks ever so much for your insight on that, Dave. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. It's great.
Thanks so much, Kathy and Dave. Some fantastic pointers in there, and particularly thinking about packaging and beyond food as well. I'm just thinking, James, with that in mind, kind of handing over to you. Can you tell us a bit about your own plant-based journey and what was your light bulb moment at Unilever Foodservice?
Thanks for that, Fran. It's really great, and thanks for Kathy and for Dave there as well. Yeah, just what's my personal plant-based journey? It really started about 5-6 years ago for me. I was working for a large contract caterer, been a chef for many years, more years than I care to imagine. And we were doing lots of stuff for Veganuary. We started doing stuff then. We were doing like meat-free days, and so much so that our group that we had, I was looking after, about a third of all sales were vegetarian and vegan and plant-based dishes. It was all part of what we were doing then. But in 2019, this was the light bulb moment for me was then, because we were in the midst of Veganuary, doing all sorts of functions and different options we were doing. And then the Lancet book came out. So it's a respected scientific journal, and what they said is they were looking for real dietary change in how we eat. So it was quite contentious at the time. It listed eating sort of protein bits about 15 grams of fish a day, so many grams of meat, but really concentrating on the vegetables that we're eating and the quality that we're doing. So it really sort of struck home to me the fragility of our food systems that we have, and the real significant change to be more sustainable, to look after animal welfare, and to move into more of that sort of plant-based arena of what we're doing. So what we see is it's a massive challenge. I see it as the biggest challenge we've probably really got for how we approach food. It's that positive bit that's going to go across all sorts of diets, because it's not just for being vegan and plant-based, it's for being sort of flexitarian as well, which you see as most of the people. And that's my own diet as well. That's what I kind of eat plant-based for most of the week. But for a few days, I would eat some quality meat and fish. But it has to be sustainably sourced. It has to be good quality for that. And it's also my own daughters as well. So family pressures, and speaking to them, they've been quite instrumental in changing our diet as a family, and that's sort of gone into what we do. So I mean, what we also realise as well is that our consumption of meat within the last 100 years has really sort of increased massively, hugely. So if you look back historically to our grandparents and their parents as well, we never used to consume that amount of meat within our diets. So what we really see is it's not necessarily about massive change. It's almost like a redress of going back to how we look at what we do in consumption and that. And plant-based and being vegan is a huge part of that. And it's one of the main reasons that I joined Unilever in the first place, is that commitment that they have to how they can help chefs in kitchens really get on board with this.
So James, tell us about how you go about innovating for Veganuary and plant-based all round.
So when we look at innovating, primarily we look at how the dishes have to be tasty. So really looking at focusing that primarily we're delivering those tastes, those textures that you expect from meat dishes. They're just that they happen to be plant-based. So we know that our consumers are super conscious. Innovation is key for them as well. We look at a range of different meal occasions. So when we're looking at those innovations, we look at those meal occasions we're looking for. So it may be something like a dirty hot dog, which is super fast, quick and indulgent, something more traditional, something like a roast dinner, or then we're looking at those nutritionally dense, really packed, pure, clean dishes. So to innovate on what we're doing, we have a two-pronged approach to that. We look at increasing our vegetable content for those dishes, and we use things like the North Future 50 report, which is focused on having a more biodiverse range of ingredients for that. They're all plants, all plant-based. They're chosen to be more nutritionally dense. They take less energy to grow and resources, and therefore more sustainable for our future. Because we've realized that 75% of the global food production relies on 12 arable crops and 5 protein sources. So it's all about expanding that for that. We also look from an innovation point of view is developing things like meat replacement. We have a brand called the Vegetarian Butcher, which is really looking at focusing on those tastes and those textures that you want from meat. So for that major flexitarian market, those people who enjoy those meat dishes, that's what we're looking to help them with. In regards to the product development and the way that we work directly with the kitchens and the businesses. So we work them bespoke to what they need, because there's no point in having something that's going to be super sort of labor intensive, because we understand across the industry the labor is a premium. Everybody wants to is begging for staff, is for having that, and we want to make it super easy. So we've increased it. We really look at flavour. So flavour in plant-based dishes can be a challenge. We've already had that sort of traditional chef training, which is quite regimented, quite precise, but really heavily meat-based. And really what we're looking to do is changing that perception. So we look at the flavour for the whole dish. We focus on things like umami, savouriness, amplifying natural sweetnesses within certain vegetables like carrots and onions. And we also look at preserving, little smoking, but without that acridness, and giving things like we got flavorings like grill notes that really give that sort of experience of that idea of having those meat-based dishes. We also look at things like it's another taste called kokumi, which is really described as giving richness. And that is really something that we focus on, because that cannot always be present in traditional vegetarian or vegan dishes. So really doing stuff like that really helps to bring these dishes really to life and to give that. And that's how we help them.
Oh, thanks so much, James. It's absolutely fascinating hearing about kind of different flavours and how you develop those, and perhaps some of the things you haven't considered make a great dish. Just wondering more about how chefs and teams can get involved. Do you have any top tips for that?
Yeah, I mean, we look at training. So we offer some training ourselves into plant-based dishes and that. We also work, we know that with some colleges, some institutions that are really already embedding this as part of their training and what we're doing. But what we do is also not look at them from a college perspective, but chefs have been in the industry for a while. So really looking at helping them along that journey and how they do it. I know that we've listened to Toby and Dave as well. It's also about how it's placed on the menu. So it's something that's separate. It's integral. It's how you place that. And if it's integral in the menu, then it becomes like a natural choice. It doesn't have to be separate from meat dishes. It doesn't have to be like an historical footnote, which they kind of have done. It's all about including that. What we end up to do as well is we look at the chefs as well and how they give super relevant recipe content. We don't look at doing it just for January, but it's for year round as well. So we want to help chefs to give that content. Veganuary is the catalyst for it. It really helps move that along. But it's a help about driving that year round and just putting that on their menus.
So much, James. It's absolutely brilliant insights there. Can I now hand over to Zoe and Tony?
Oh, thank you. I'm Tony Vernelli from Veganuary, the head of communications. For those of you who haven't heard of Veganuary, we're a British-based charity. We were founded in 2014, and our sole purpose really is to inspire and support people who are interested in trying vegan, primarily in January, but actually people can take part at any time of the year. To help these people who are trying vegan with us, we also work with businesses to increase the amount of food vegan provision in shops, restaurants, and make it more visible and accessible to people on the high street, and also make it more affordable. Last year in January, we had over 580,000 people take part, but we do know from some Kantar research that actually 10 times more people do Veganuary than officially register with us. So it is actually much bigger than that. We receive a lot of attention in the media. We had over 1,500 press stories last year, and more than 825 new vegan products or menu items were launched around the world. So it is growing and growing every year. At the end of everyone's 1 month pledge, we ask them a few questions. So we do a participant survey. So of our 580,000 participants last year, we know that the vast majority were women. So 85% were female, and that's pretty standard. That we don't particularly target women. That's just where the majority of people who sign up happen to fall. We also ask them what their current diet is before they take part. And it might be surprising for people to learn that it is primarily people who are still eating meat. You might think it's vegetarians who want to take that final step to being vegan, but it's not. The majority of people are omnivores when they sign up. And then, of course, a large proportion are already vegetarian. And we do have some vegans who take part. A lot of them are new vegans, so they're looking for recipes and, more info, more help. But also people just enjoy being a part of something that's quite big. So even if they've been vegan for quite a long time, they like joining in just to feel the buzz when there's so many other people doing it. The age range might also be surprising. People tend to think it's sort of the 20-year-olds who are primarily interested in eating plant-based, but actually we find the majority of our participants fall between sort of 25 and 55. And countries, that really reflects where we're active. So our countries where we have the largest number of signups is where we have the greatest presence, really. We also ask people why they signed up to take part. And every year it sort of fluctuates between animals or health being the top reason. Last year it was animals by quite a wide margin. And then health, and then the environment coming in very close third. And that's growing. The number of people saying they're doing it for the environment has increased quite substantially over the past few years. 2 or 3 years ago, it was 12%. Last year, it was 18%. The year before that, 18%. Then last year, 21%. So it is growing quite quickly. And as I mentioned earlier, we did a study with Kantar in 2019, and they looked at their full consumer database and asked how many people had given up vegan products, or had given up animal products during January. Not necessarily having done Veganuary is the term, just decided to give up animal products in January. And they extrapolated from their database that 1.3 million people in Britain had given up animal products in January. So 830,000 of these people had done it for the very first time. So they weren't vegan already. Now, this is 10 times more than the number of people who signed up officially through the Veganuary website. So we know that the impact of this Going Vegan in January campaign is a lot wider than just our data. Their experience also showed more females than males taking part, but not quite as heavily skewed to females as our Veganuary participants. And again, their age range was older than you might expect. So theirs is peaking between 30 and 44. The reasons for signing up, again, very similar to ours, health being the top for them, closely followed by animals, and then the environment. So it shows that Veganuary participants are very representative of everyone who is interested in trying vegan these days. We also asked them how they fared during their month. So did they manage to maintain a vegan diet during the whole month? And we find that 3/4 of our participants did succeed in maintaining their vegan diet for the whole month. So we're also interested in finding out if trying vegan for 1 month has any long-term impacts on people's diet. So we asked them whether they had any intention to stay vegan before they took part in Veganuary. And we found that 25% of people planned to go vegan after their month. But in actuality, 44% of people decided to stay vegan at the end of their 1-month pledge. And I'll come on to a slide later that explains a few reasons why they made that decision. And we found that 30% of our participants had actually stayed vegan 6 months on from the end of their pledge, slightly lower than those who intended to, but still a good proportion of people staying vegan. But what's more interesting is the number of people who reduced animal products in their diet, quite substantially, actually. So we found that 38% of those who were not staying vegan had still removed 75% of the animal products in their diet 6 months later, and 14% had reduced by at least 50%. So overall, 82% of our participants had either stayed vegan or reduced their animal products by at least 50%. And that has a huge impact for the environment. Now, perhaps this might be one of the more interesting slides. So what were the challenges people face? So what might have been a deciding factor in them choosing not to stay vegan? And you might think it's all about the food, but actually the number one challenge that people faced during their month was dealing with friends and family. So that social pressure really is quite crucial for people making dietary changes. And eating out still comes in the top 5 on the list as well. So people seem to be quite confident cooking at home, but it's when they go out to eat that they're finding challenges. And those two might be related as well. You know, if you're going out to eat with your friends and family, it can be quite awkward if you have to order chips and salad, or you have to really customize things on the menu because there isn't anything on there that you can already eat. That's not going to lend itself to fluid social situations. So by increasing the provision available when people eat out, we can hopefully help address those 2 reasons. And then kind of the proof of how much they enjoyed their 1-month challenge, we asked them how likely they are to try vegan again in the future. And we find that at least 87% of our participants who are not already staying vegan are likely to try a vegan diet again in the future. So they obviously didn't find it completely horrific, but maybe just want to have another go to see if they can do it better next time.
Thank you, Tony, for some amazing insights there. So as Veganuary is a consumer-facing campaign and we're at the forefront of shoppers' minds, we really want to showcase to you just what a huge opportunity it is for you to get involved and to understand that the consumers who are doing Veganuary are being influenced by the campaign. And the trends continue outside of Veganuary itself. We have some incredible research showing just how many people take part. So YouGov reported that during January 2021, 5% of all Brits attempted and tried plant-based options during January. And according to Kantar, 1 in 5 households have at least one member of the family who is actively reducing their meat consumption. So there is a lot of reasons for you to get involved. And as a campaign, we're creating all of this demand, and you as operators are creating the supply. And we just really need to make it as easy as possible for people to make a conscious choice. So a few highlights from both retailers, brands and restaurants and the success of Veganuary. We can learn a lot from what's happening elsewhere. With a huge amount of support, with over 800 new products launched across the category specifically timed for Veganuary, we've got a few highlights that we wanted to share with you. So Pret launched the meatless meatball wrap alongside their meatball wrap for the big campaign for Veganuary, and it quickly became one of their top 5 bestsellers during launch week. Tesco, as a retailer, saw a huge demand in and increase in purchases of plant-based foods during January, with over 700,000 new shoppers purchasing their first vegan product for the first time. So how to have a successful Veganuary? As a campaign, we really see this as a key moment in your marketing calendar and a great way to make the most of the interest in new shoppers interested in veganism. As a campaign, we offer all of the marketing tools and resources for free for you to be able to bring Veganuary to life. A few ways you can do this is launch and highlight your vegan and plant-based options, new menu items, and really use recipes to inspire people and showcase what you have on offer. So digital as well. You can really utilize your website and your social media channels to showcase just how easy it is for shoppers to get hold of the products that you've got on your menu, and be really proud and show all of the delicious options. Use your in-house screens too. In store, it's all about creating that theatre and showcasing your promotions, special offers, menu items, using point of sale, and really putting plant-based at the top of your menu. A few examples on the high street from restaurants and hospitality really showcase all of the delicious options are accessible to everyone and are delicious. So it's all about creating that choice and that accessibility. A few examples of restaurant point of sale. As you may know, Wagamama now have 50% of the menu is now plant-based. Leon are offering vegan options for all dishes. Subway, it's all about indulgence and I guess normalizing the options. Starbucks have breakfast, lunch, dinner and snacks, and it's all about joining the celebration during Veganuary. Outside of hospitality, we also have the Veganuary Workplace Challenge, where offices and workplaces take part and encourage their employees. Now, the key part to the Workplace Challenge is ensuring that offices with canteens, food service offerings, they have a vegan option as standard on the menus. And the key part is to showcase that these options are available as operators. So a couple of things that workplaces have done during Veganuary that have been successful beyond January and continued from February, March, April onwards. PricewaterhouseCoopers have offered oat milk as standard, and they've even installed plant-based coffee machines on a couple of floors within their offices, which is awesome. A lot of menus start and lead with the plant-based option. We even had a care home in January 2021 during lockdown that actually took part in Veganuary with all of their residents. And that just shows you just how the world is changing. It's about the sustainability and the health of employees and all of the people who eat within the canteens. And it's about making it as easy as possible for everyone to get hold of great tasting vegan food. So with Veganuary coming up in the next 6 weeks, please do get in touch if you'd like to take part. There's lots of opportunities. And of course, let's make it the biggest Veganuary yet.
Thanks so much for that, Zoe and Tony. It was absolutely incredible to see how many people have taken up Veganuary since the start and how it's growing in momentum, and people making that long-term shift with their eating habits. There's such an opportunity for food businesses out there to attract people wanting to become vegan and really looking for that choice. So Thank you ever so much for that overview. If I can now hand over to Max. Max, it'd be brilliant to kind of hear from you in terms of what you found about how consumers are thinking and feeling about plant-based and vegan, and kind of how you've seen this as a bit of a growing trend.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Fran. So I'm Alex Wiggins. I'm the Insight and Innovation Lead at VERJ, which is part of Lab Group. And what we do there is we're an insights agency that uses data-driven research and behavioural science to try and solve commercial and societal problems. So the take on this from a kind of VERJ angle is looking at the trends and the language of thought from how people are discussing veganism and plant-based eating over time. So what we can do is move from a kind of inside-out approach where we're interviewing people and we're trying to understand what's going on inside their minds, to an outside-in approach, which I call like the trawler net. So what we can do at VERJ, and what we've done, and I'll talk you through some of the insights we've found, is we've basically looked at vast amounts of online social data. So what people are tweeting about, what people are saying on Facebook, you know, all these millions words of discourse on veganism and plant-based eating. We've extrapolated that and analysed it to try and understand the patterns about how people actually think, speak and behave when it comes to veganism. So what we did here is we looked at conversations that mention on Twitter that mentions words such as veganism or plant-based or anything related, and we compared the first half of the year conversations to the second half of the year. And what this tells us is how the sentiment is changing over time. And what did we find? So we found that in the second half of the year, people were 1.7 times more likely to mention bravery, audacity and boldness, and they were significantly more likely to mention the term we. So there's this growing sense of social identity and courageousness and adventurousness that's being associated with veganism over time. We also found that people were significantly more likely to mention texture, taste, vitamins, nutrients, the term unfiltered, and as well the phrase sleep better as the year went on, so over time. So what this indicates is, one, that aesthetics are key when talking about veganism. More and more people are interested in the health value, but also how it looks and how it feels in your mouth. And secondly, there seems to be this shift towards general wider health attributes such as sleeping better. And finally, a point here we found is that people were more likely to mention climate and sustainability issues, but not just that, they were more likely as time went on to mention terms such as shortages. So actually having a wider interest in the implications that veganism can have and benefit society as we move forward in time. Now, what we did here is we looked at the difference between how people talked about veganism and how people talked about plant-based eating. And you might think, typically, there's not that much of a difference. However, what we found is when it came to veganism, people typically in their conversations on Twitter, they're more likely to talk about, you know, their arguments generally. They're more likely to talk about people, and they're more likely to talk about animal ethics in comparison to plant-based conversations. So, and I think this is reflected in the packaging. The packaging for around veganism is a lot more sort of disruptive and maybe even a bit dividing, because it wants to play to that sense of identity that vegans have. However, for plant-based, we found that the word transitioning was more likely to be mentioned. The word protein was more likely to be mentioned, and the term looks was more likely to be mentioned. So what this indicates to me is that plant-based is a bit softer. It's a bit more about as a step rather than an identity, but a way to transition into maybe a more health conscious lifestyle. And as a result, because there might be less sort of strong identity drivers, the looks and the appearance of these foods is a lot more important, it seems, to plant-based people who are interested in plant-based and talking about plant-based food. So I've popped the slide here just to show you some of the different signs and symbols that vegan brands are using to convey different underlying messages. So just to start at the top right, we can see that the messages here are all around not missing out on anything. So there's a lot of conveyance around how vegan food can be indulgent, can be masculine, and can be even uncompromising. So typically this sort of ideology is that, if you're not having meat on the dish, you might be missing out and compromising. And what we can see with these brands is they're playing to this now. They're actually saying, no, it can take center stage and you can have a really juicy and almost guilty pleasure type of food. If we look at the bottom right, there's this sense of pride, vibrancy and inclusivity. And what this is doing is it might be paving the way for this new vision for veganism and plant-based eating that has a wider, more inclusive feel. If we look at the top right, some examples you might be familiar with, we can see that it's a lot of tongue-in-cheek with regards to the messaging. It's quite cheeky, it's quite destructive, it's a bit bold and adventurous, playing back to that finding we found from earlier. So brands, they might want to consider being disruptive and almost surprising and triggering to the sense of novelty that vegan and plant-based food can actually have. And I'll touch on this a bit later. But the fact that there's these new flavors, new ways of cooking, that might be being reflected. And brands might want to consider reflecting this through kind of cheeky, disruptive campaigns. And on the bottom right, we can see that this is more associated with kind of plant-based, but there's this sense of freshness, beautifully curated imagery and lifestyle imagery. So what this kind of indicates to me in the signs and symbols here is that, veganism doesn't need to be, vegan food and plant-based food doesn't need to be boring or dull or uncompromising. It can be really fresh and focused on the lifestyle and general health benefits that can be portrayed. Why do I touch on this slide? The main point is that there are key underlying themes in the vegan landscape that are being communicated, and over time it's likely that these themes will shift and there'll be new framing, probably, I bet 50p on this, around new flavors, climate importance and general health benefits, as opposed to simple sort of meat alternatives, for example. And as a result, brands and restaurants, they might want to consider communicating to these underlying themes, because this is what will try and resonate to new and existing customers and audiences as we go forward in time. We also looked at what are people saying about vegan restaurants. So on Twitter, when the term vegan restaurants is mentioned, how is that shifting over time? As time goes on, people are 8.7 times more likely to also mention the word options. So people really, really want options here. They want choice. And as you can see by that verbatim quote from someone on Twitter, there is a really genuine attention and care for people who are putting together specialized vegan and plant-based dishes, not just, slapping together salad and chip. And I think this comes back to that sense of novelty, trying something new. People are more and more interested in trying something new, trying different options that are becoming available. Secondly, people will more likely to mention the term factory as time goes on. And I think this is widely linked to this running theme throughout sort of these insights, that sustainability and hyper-conscious awareness is becoming a bit more prevalent as we go forward in time. And finally, people are more likely to mention terms around investigations, such as checking or researching or examining. So this shows that people are really searching. And I think when it comes to tone of voice for vegan brands and restaurants, they must consider, communicating this back with things such as search no further, or, we've got what you're looking for, making it really, really easy for vegans and want to become vegans to find what they're looking for. And I think this point relates to one mentioned earlier, that, if you've got a group of 6 people and one of them is a vegan, people are going to search for the best options that can include them, because they're the common denominator that needs to be accommodated for in the group. So what are people saying about Veganuary, relating to Zoe and Tony's slides earlier? Over time, how the perception is changing. More people are likely to mention advice. So people really, there's this culture of support and community that's going on when it comes to Veganuary, and people want the tips and tricks there. There's a much more likely to mention the future. So people are generally finding it easier as well, and they want to continue this trend. It's something that's not just, a fleeting moment. People talk about how they want to continue it for the future. And finally, people also 711 times more likely than in the start of the year to mention dry January compared to the previous year in Veganuary, to mention dry January. What does this indicate? it indicates that people are becoming hyper conscious in various walks of life. So their health, their well-being, and their society, they're caring more and more about these joint impacts that eating vegan food can have. And just to summarize on the key takeaways here, what can we do based on this consumer sentiment knowledge? So brands and restaurants can try and play to this growing sense of adventurousness, beauty, and novelty of food. So more and more people are, they're wanting to try it. Let's make it into a challenge and highlight the key tips and tricks that people can try when getting into it, and also communicating just the beauty and the art of the form and the novelty in which the new flavors can bring about. I think as well, vegan brands and restaurants, they can leverage key ideologies associated typically with non-vegan food, such as tradition. I think, James, you mentioned it earlier around sort of the Sunday roast alternative. That's a huge tradition which vegan brands and restaurants can really tap into. It's an area which is typically associated with meat, so why not bring through that ideology and associated there. Some other themes are such as tradition, indulgence, and that sort of purity of food. And finally, the big one and the running theme, which I think we've heard throughout all of this, is considering tone of voice and messaging around the growing personal drivers that are tied to veganism. So the impacts on health, which are physical health, the impacts on well-being, how eating clean and unfiltered food can make that make you feel a lot better. Sensory benefits, so new textures, tastes, smells, flavors, looks as well, really playing to that can help people sort of as a gateway to get into this industry. And finally, climate is just the thing that's not going away. It's becoming more and more important as people are becoming hyper conscious, and I think that sustainability angle is going to really be so important when vegan brands and restaurants are communicating their new products. Thank you.
That was absolutely fantastic and tapped into, like you said, quite a few of the themes that we've been hearing about today. So those flavours that James was talking about and what appeals to people, and tradition, and also some of the reasons and methodologies, I guess, that people are choosing to go more plant-based and vegan. I'd imagine with more consciousness around sort of climate change and well-being, that's potentially set to grow.
Yeah, I think, definitely as it becomes into the mainstream more and more, there's going to be these key themes which brands and restaurants can leverage just to get more people involved, more people trying the Flexitarian and really consider it rather than reject it initially.
I want to just say a massive thank you today to all of our fantastic speakers for all of your brilliant insights, and there's some great pointers and thought starters there, I think. So just to sum up, there's no doubt that the momentum around people making that shift to vegan and plant-based is increasing and likely to continue to increase as themes like climate change and well-being become more and more sort of front of mind, and that having a fantastic offering for Veganuary and beyond is a brilliant opportunity. And actually, if there are one or two vegan plant-based people in a group of people, it can influence where everybody wants to eat. So getting involved this Veganuary, having a brilliant offering that then can kind of create some momentum for you going forwards is a brilliant thing to consider. There are lots of ways to get involved, so do go onto the Veganuary website and have a look. We'll also be sharing some resources at the end of this session as well. And it is worth considering the whole package, so not just food, but also packaging as we move forward. Guys, thank you so much for joining today's session and listening to our recording. Without further ado, I'll share the resources which are available to you as part of it, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So we've got some great guides actually that Veganuary have put together for you to help, and we've also got a copy of VERJ's presentation as well. You can download all of these from the QR code here or using the short link. If you miss this, you haven't got your phone ready to zap it with your QR code reader, don't worry. We'll be putting this video on YouTube a bit later this week, so look out for that, and you can watch it again. We'll try and also sharpen up the resolution a bit for you, because I know it was difficult to read some of those stats, but you can also then pass this QR code then and download the resources with a bit more time to do so. Zoe, Tony, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about these brilliant guides that you've put together.
Yeah, sure. We provide all of the resources and assets for Veganuary for free. So you've got a business support toolkit, which includes lots of the stats that we shared with you today, plus some examples of how you can get involved. The workplace challenge is more, I guess, internally focused for your teams to take part in Veganuary. And then we've got some specific opportunities for food service and restaurants to share with you as well.
Thanks, Zoe, that's great. And Max, I've included a copy of your presentation here and those fantastic insights. There's also the links here to be able to go onto Veganuary's website, find how to sign up, find out lots more information. And also, if you want more plant-based vegan recipe ideas, inspiration, you can also go to the event. There's some brilliant pages in there with lots of great ideas, including the vegetarian butcher stand. James referenced vegetarian butcher in his section. But if you go onto the new food stand there, onto the winter stand, you'll also find some great ideas, as well as some from additional suppliers. And you can also go onto the Breaks website as well. If you go onto the new food page there's some fantastic new dishes, new recipes, new products. You can look at those in our range, and we'll also be updating the vegan plant-based section of our website in the next few days, so look out for that. There'll be, again, lots of great ideas and products to help you, whether you are scratch cooking, you're looking for components, or you want meal solutions. So lots and lots and lots there to help get you started. If you go onto the Breaks YouTube channel, you'll see a playlist for this event and also previous ones as well. So you can watch anything back on demand by going on to there. So if you want to recap on anything, or you want to pass it on, or you've missed anything, then you can do that. Without further ado, we've had some questions come through, so just wanted to ask those if that's okay. I think probably the first one that's come through, Tony, Zoe, is probably more for you guys, but it was a really good question actually around effects of eating meat on the environment and methane emissions and COP26. I just have you guys involved in any discussions around methane and the effects on the environment and eating less meat, either as a result of COP26 or just otherwise?
Yeah, certainly this is one of the main reasons people sign up to Veganuary, because of the environmental impacts of animal agriculture, and certainly the impacts on climate change would probably be the forefront of most people's minds now. Methane is a huge problem from animal agriculture. It's in both what the animals themselves produce, so particularly ruminants produce a lot of methane in their belches and farts and manure, but then it's also released in the production of animal feed. And of course we produce an awful lot of crops to feed to farmed animals, because it's a very inefficient way to produce food. You know, you get less food in return when you cycle your plants through animals first. So that has a bigger impact on the climate as well than eating the plants directly. We did have a campaign specifically aimed at COP26 to try and get leaders engaged on the subject of animal agriculture and actually discuss it at COP26 and come to some sort of agreement. And unfortunately, it was an issue that they just didn't really touch upon. That we weren't inside. Our stuff was all external. We had ads going in Glasgow and had some scientists doing some media for us. But internally, groups like Humane Society International, ProVeg, they all held panels inside COP26 as well with experts, you know, on this subject. Which were well attended, but probably more by all the other NGOs attending rather than the government leaders, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Tony. I guess just leading on from that, have you seen kind of a big impact already on the number of people taking up Veganuary and just generally, I guess, the noise around vegan and plant-based as a result of COP26? And do we expect that to kind of continue and grow as we go into next year?
I would say yes. It has been on the increase over the past few years, and I think it will only continue. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what the numbers look like for Veganuary this year versus last year, and whether or not there's just like an enormous upward trend this year, I guess.
We're hoping for that enormous upward trend, that's for sure. I think definitely from the work that I do, which is kind of the brands, restaurant, retailers, food service side, we're definitely seeing a lot of restaurants looking at putting the kind of carbon footprint on their menu, to actually kind of showcase that plant-based options do have a lower impact on the environment compared to the animal-based dishes, which I think is quite interesting. And there's definitely a key theme, I think, from brands in particular, really focusing on that environmental motivation to sign up for Veganuary as well. So I think this January will be really interesting to see whether that shift is having that impact. So hopefully we'll see some awesome numbers in Veganuary.
Yeah, and I guess Tony, Zoe, this might also be a question for Max, but we have a sense of the proportion of people that might be vegan in around sort of 5 years' time versus traditionally meat eaters, I suppose. It's just interesting to understand if we think that is going to be a real fundamental sea change.
I think from our data, we find that the majority of people who do Veganuary reduce rather than completely eliminate animal products. So from last year, what was 30% saying they would stay fully vegan, but then a much larger proportion reducing. So although I think the number of people who do go vegan will increase, I think the number of people just cutting back dramatically is where we'll see the biggest increase.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. And I guess thinking about sort of key barriers to eating out, do we have a sense of what's holding people back from choosing places to eat out? And kind of for those that are in the hospitality industry on this call, whether or not there's any sort of pointers for what they can do?
Yeah, I think eating out as a group, the person who is vegan, plant-based, or has a special dietary requirement always dictates where the group goes. I think a lot of restaurants and food service operators have got some pretty decent options, but I guess it's more behind the scenes, making sure that they can get hold of the right dishes. They've got the inspiration before, like, to make the dishes as appealable as possible. It's not just targeting vegans, it's targeting anyone who loves delicious food but is happy to kind of eat the plant-based option. So I think there is a few challenges in price. There's definitely a few challenges in availability. So key dishes, we know that there are some awesome sandwiches out there, for example, that are readily available in zoos, in theme parks, etc., when you're out and about, and they're not always that easy to get hold of, even though that they exist. So I think there is definitely a few challenges that we have behind the scenes in the supply chain, but also I guess it's appealing to the mass market. That's one of the big key things when putting kind of a vegan option on the menu is, if you're a burger restaurant, serve a burger, don't serve a salad. If you're a pizza restaurant, serve a vegan pizza, don't serve a salad. And I think it's really kind of, for me, the biggest recommendation is look at what you're offering and offer a vegan version. Sunday roasts. You need a vegan Sunday roast option. I don't want to sit there and eat a risotto or some pasta or a salad when everyone else is having a hearty Sunday roast. So I think it's really playing to both your chefs and kind of kitchen capabilities, as well as kind of making sure that there's some interesting options that actually appeal to everyone.
Yeah. And do you see any brands do it really well? I guess if there's any examples that sort of stick out in your mind.
I guess from a hospitality perspective, Pret have done a good job from a food to go perspective. Wagamama, again, I mean, more than 50% of their menu is plant-based, and they have some really interesting, well-flavoured options that fit with the rest of their menu as well.
Thanks, Zoe. And I guess question for James, are there any sort of dishes that you're seeing a trend around, I suppose, in terms of I suppose a preference for? So like a great burger, I suppose, leading on from what Zoe was saying in terms of a roast dinner, is there anything that you're sort of seeing that, you know, is it almost like a must have on your menu?
Actually, it depends on your restaurant, depends on your outlet, depends what you're doing. I think some people are great for that. Those fast indulgence, something is some people are more suited towards those. We find that some of the options are more those traditional options. So it's nothing really cut and fast that you can say, yes, there's this particular menu. I think it's making it across the board. So what we tend to do when we work with anybody is to look at taking the menu that they have and looking at doing those plant-based hacks. So how can they take what they have and offer those plant-based versions of that? So that's the main reason that we kind of look at doing those and developing it and just making those the tastiest dishes possible. So yeah, as we said before, it's not about making them exclusive. It's just making it as part of your menu. Yeah.
And I had a question come through about meat-shaped items, I suppose. So those items of food that are designed to be like meat, like bacon and burgers and what have you. Do you have a sense of who those types of dishes are aimed at, or who's kind of taking those up? Or is it just kind of just holistically across the board?
There's a bit across the board. I mean, it depends on who you're looking for. You could say the majority of them are looking at the Flexitarians. So if you are vegan, if you have been eating vegetable basis, if you've been doing that for many, many years, I mean, that is fantastic. What we're looking at doing is proposing it to everybody, opening it really up. And that's where they kind of help to replicate those sort of tastes and textures that those meat lovers are looking for. Another thing we do, one thing we do is that some people really want that. And that is almost, some of it is almost like a transition that was mentioned before. So you're transitioning a little bit into becoming plant-based, but it's just making sure that it's accessible for everyone. And that's what it is. And it's all about, for me as well, it's about taking that out of the animal food chain. So it's reducing those, improving that welfare and helping with that. So thank you.
No problem. Question come through about clean products and I guess whether vegan products have more kind of ingredients and additives to make them a great product. I guess it's just a question around how can we make sure that vegan products are kind of, have great quality ingredients, aren't made of lots of preservatives and that sort of thing. I think it's a common thing that comes up, isn't it? Anything that's kind of been a bit more processed, I guess. I'm going back to what you were saying, Zoe, about Wagamamas. I've experienced Wagamamas as a vegetarian myself, and their dishes are almost a twist, if you like, on their original menu. So they quite often will take what existed before, and then they'll kind of strip out the meat elements and add in some brilliant sort of plant-based elements instead, like natural products like tofu, for example. So I guess if you're concerned about that sort of thing, there are go-to vegan components that are great components.
Yeah, I don't actually think it's about flavour, it's about cooking techniques, it's about char grilling vegetables to give that sense of texture and flavour and different. It's not just steaming some veg. And I think there is a misconception that a lot of vegan foods are overly processed. Some are, some aren't. And I think that's where chefs come in, and the training for chefs and the understanding of food is really taking vegetables and plant-based ingredients and making them delicious. And I think there is, I guess, the entry-level vegans, the people who start their vegan journey in Veganuary, they want familiar foods. They want the burgers and the sausages and different things. But I think as you start discovering all of these new flavors and these new options, you go on a journey. Your taste buds change. You kind of get to level, like you start at level 1 vegan and you go up to level 10. And by level 10, you're not necessarily wanting the easy direct swaps of animal-based products to a vegan product. You want to get more flavor, more variety, but it's about seasoning. It's not necessarily about putting in all of those additives and making an unnatural product. I think there's a lot we can do also very cheaply, I guess, and affordable for people to actually use like real ingredients and put flavor in. It's about being clever rather than kind of putting lots of unnatural processed items together.
And can I just add in on that from our chef's point of view at Breaks? It almost brings out the creativity in the chefs, without a doubt, that whilst you have the mix of prepared items, as you would in any diet, to be fair, you would have prepared items in that, but it's what you do and how creative you are, and most definitely the flavors. And we've done a lot of work with many of our customers are really looking at how they put more plant-based on their menu, and the flavors. And as I say, I think for most chefs, once they've bought into the idea and have gone on that journey, and I think it's been a journey for many chefs, and were reluctant, but now actually some of the great dishes, and I've been to some fantastic plant-based buffets, meals, where you go away thinking that was fantastic, I need to create it, but they're scratch cooked. They're using component products just like you would in any other cooking. It's not all about a finished product for certain.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. James, would you add anything to that at all?
No, completely echo what Kathy was saying, really. It's all about those, it's that innovation, it's getting chefs out of that comfort zone. So they're traditionally sort of been schooled in those sort of meat sort of processes. So it's all about re-education. And that's why I said it's probably one of the biggest things that chefs have to kind of look for. And it's all about rethinking about how they approach things. And it's all, as you said, I know that as Veganuary said, as Zoe said, it is all about flavour. It is all about taste. And that's the most important.
Yeah. I guess just one final question, and this might be one we need to take offline, but is there any evidence that vegan plant-based cookery is being included in the curriculum at catering colleges, so that young chefs are informed and have some formal training? I'm not sure if we know the answer to that one, but it's a great question.
I don't think we do, and I'm certainly with somebody next week who's quite involved in that sort of thing. And actually, it's a really good question to find that out, because most certainly should be, but we know curriculums don't change that quickly, and they're led by different sources, sort of change the curriculum. But without a doubt, as an industry, it's something we certainly should be trying to push to have that on the agenda, because if we're looking at carbon and everything else, then this is a great way to get those people out of colleges. They certainly don't seem to do a lot of it on MasterChef, do they? So I think we need to see a bit more of it.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen a little bit of it. I know that it was on the Great British Menu. I know you've had a few chefs on there. There was a little bit on that. I know when we talk the National Chef of the Year, the Young Chef of the Year was around sort of plant-based. Was around that, use some of the Future 50 ingredients that we talked about earlier on. So it is that. I mean, there are some institutions that are doing their own sort of training as well in plant-based, but it tends to be a lot smaller. And it'd be great to include that as part of the general curriculum for chefs to make it across the board.
Yeah. All right, well, that concludes today's session. Big thank you again to everybody that's watched and stayed on to the end. It's been quite a long webinar today, but absolutely worthwhile, I think, in terms of all of the content and ideas. Like I say, we'll be putting this on YouTube in a few days' time, so look out for that. You'll be able to download everything that you've seen here today. And yes, just thank you very much for joining, and particularly to all of our speakers for all of your help and support. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.